Hello, today I'd like to talk about Spec Ops The Line, and while Spec Ops The Line is not exactly a horror game, it's often included in discussions on horror games. Like there was an article on Gama Sutra about measuring the responses people had to horror games, and they included Spec Ops: The Line, and someone brought it up on the forum once or twice. I think it was Jay Price. But anyway, there was a PSN sale, and I got it for $5, so I figured I would give it a try. So probably let me start from the beginning, my whole full impressions of Spec Ops: The Line. So I first heard about the game at E3. I don't know which one, maybe let's say 2011, 2012, something like that. And the main draw was that they were giving out t-shirts. I don't know if you've been to E3, but basically, like, playing games there, it's kind of not great just because they give you these little snippets of the game, and they're often not designed well to pick up and play, or someone was in the middle of a game and you don't really know where it starts. But anyway, so you actually had to play Spec Ops: The Line to get your game, and so I was stuck in like some desert bowl and I couldn't figure out where to go. And so I just wandered around in circles until the lady came around and gave me my shirt. So I did get my Spec Ops: The Line shirt for wandering in a circle for a minute. But obviously the game didn't leave a very positive impression. I was lost and stuck, and it looked extraordinarily bland. I mean, a military third-person action shooter when with in a desert setting. And so when I played the game, it also sort of left me, I mean, it didn't start out very strong. So the first thing is, it's like, hey, I need to find Lieutenant Conrad, and I immediately thought, Joseph Conrad wrote Heart of Darkness. This is going to be Heart of Darkness or Apocalypse Now, which is based on Heart of Darkness. And that sort of dampened my enjoyment of the plot, because I'm like, oh, I know what this is about, which, I mean, it wasn't entirely true. It wasn't, a complete, remake or whatever, but I think it was sort of a poor choice of name. I guess maybe they assumed that their homage to Conrad would not be noticed, but like for me it was just like, I'm in Heart of Darkness mode, no surprises here, and I mean there were some surprises towards the end, but it sort of dampened my sort of emotional roller coaster over the duration of the game, because I felt like I knew what I could expect. And the other interesting thing is that basically the game played like Gears of War, like exactly like Gears of War, which is interesting because they use the Unreal 3 engine. And I heard that basically after Gears of War released, Epic gave out the source code for Gears of War. So basically people could say, oh yeah, I'm just making levels for Gears of War, and then call it a game. And I mean, that's to some extent, I think, I mean, they made some changes, but I think a lot of the mechanics, a lot of the systems, a lot of the way the weapons worked were the same as Gears of War, or very similar. And interestingly, the one other game I can think of that did that is, and let me see if I can find it quickly. Okay, the extremely popular 50 Cent Blood on the Sand. And so 50 Cent also uses the cover mechanics of Gears, and also feels a ton like Gears, and was also made with Unreal Engine as well. And it had the amazing plot where you go to perform, you're 50 Cent, and you go to perform in the Middle East, and they pay you with a crystal encrusted skull, and then you have to go, and then it's stolen by like terrorists or something, I don't know, and then you have to go and track them down. And I don't know, I saw MC Chris a while back, and he had a great rant about how ridiculous this game was. And it's certainly ridiculous, but it doesn't actually play too terribly because, again, they just pulled on the Gears of War mechanics. I probably would have played it all the way through if it had co-op, but they stupidly took out one of the coolest features of Gears of War. But co-op is a pain because of fill rates and getting your art assets and keeping your frame rate up. So I mean, it is something they pulled out. And again, Spec Ops: The Line did not have co-op, but I don't think it's a game that would lend itself as well to co-op, whereas 50 Cent Blood on the Sand is just ridiculous. So at the beginning I was like, this is Gears of War, it's not really Gears of War with a Heart of Darkness plot, I'm not super digging it, but I played through it. But I think it was actually quite interesting because even though it had it drew on Heart of Darkness and Gears of War, I think they managed to forge their own identity really well, and I think to some extent, given the opportunity, this is sort of a good money-saving or good move for a small studio. I don't know how big Jaeger Studios is, but I assume they're not AAA sized compared to the big blockbuster ones, but they were able to create a game of more or less comparable quality because they leveraged the Unreal Engine and probably the Gears source code, which I think Gears style games could be a genre in and of themselves. And I mean, if you look at Uncharted, they didn't use the Gears source code. They write all their own tech. But I mean, it plays similarly based on cover-based shooters. But I mean, if you have the source code there, I mean, why not? Sort of my new development philosophy. But anyway, I've mostly dwelled on the bad and talked about how great 50 Cent. I keep saying 50, but apparently that's not the way that kids these days say it. But anyway. But yeah, I think the narrative and sort of the commentary on war and the horrors of war is really well done, and I think they sort of play with your expectations. Like you sit down to play Spec Ops: The Line, and you're like, okay, this is like Gears of War crossed with Call of Duty. I mean, that's sort of what it looks like. But then the Heart of Darkness themes sort of take over, and you're descending into madness and losing your moral compass and things like that. And I think they did it. They did it really well, and it's really subversive. And I think they sort of use horror very effectively to create emotions, and I think if they didn't, if they tried to do a similar game without elements of horror, I don't know how they would have done it, and I don't think it would have been effective. And I think horror as a genre, as a sort of tool in your toolbox, can be very effective for creating emotional responses. I mean, not just to scare. I don't think anyone would say that Spec Ops: The Line is scary, that Spec Ops: The Line startles you, the jump scares, the atmosphere isn't, super oppressive, and you're not fearing what lurks around the corner. But they do very effectively use horrific image to convey the horrors of war, which I think is a very important message, and something that is often lost in these, ethnocentric we're the U.S., we're gonna, I don't know, kill all the other countries. I don't know. I mean, certainly a lot of war games have a story which certainly could be perceived as negative in the global community, especially when you consider the U.S. oftentimes makes unpopular military decisions. And perhaps the interesting part about this game is that I think it was developed in Germany, and so they have are able to look at America and American video games with a different perspective and provide some global social commentary on it. So while I don't think Spec Ops is like the best, most polished, fun game, I think it's really interesting from a narrative perspective, and I think they did a really good job. And I think one of the reasons they were able to do it is because they started with a core, like here's the Gears of War game, and then they just added on the things they needed to make the game, have the emotional impact that they wanted. And I think that's a very interesting approach to game development, and certainly would lend itself well to indie game development. Like, for example, you can use the Doom 3 engine. For free, it's GPL'd or whatever, so you have to release your changes, but you could script like whole mods or whatever and then sell those commercially, because you'd be selling the mod and not the engine. And so, the Doom 3 engine could get you a lot of things. I mean, Doom 3, did some cool things. It did some things maybe not quite as good, but, would that be a good starting point if you wanted to create a horror game, if you wanted to use these flashlight mechanics and things like that, if you wanted to have some sort of first-person shooter aspects to it, or I mean, even you could probably pull out the shooting and just, have a hand. So, I mean, I think it's sort of an interesting idea of development to see, what you can take that's already out there and get you a certain point. And another sort of interesting story along this is that the original Gone Home, they wanted to use the Amnesia engine, which seems a little strange. But if you think about it, the Amnesia engine had that same mechanic where you can pick up an object and rotate it around and things like that. And so basically, the Amnesia engine had all the gameplay things they needed, which there's a blog post on it on Thomas Grip's blog. But basically he said, we can't provide support. You're probably better off using Unity, which is what they did. But I think they did the prototype in Amnesia, and I think that's sort of an interesting idea is, are there anything, any open source, any commercial engines that, get you sort of 90% there? Well, obviously it's not 90%, but, 75% or 50% even, more so than other technology choices. And I think that was a really, really smart move by Jaeger, and I think it really made Spec Ops a good game, because they didn't have to worry as much about the mechanics. The shooter mechanics were pretty solid because they were pretty similar to Gears of War, and so I mean, obviously they had to do some things. It's not completely the same game, but I think by leveraging what was available to them as an Unreal 3 licensed game, it was very smart and enabled them to, really deliver more on the narrative side, the aspects of Spec Ops: The Line that makes the game special. And so while I can't say, Spec Ops: The Line is a horror game and you should play it for all the horror, I think it's a very interesting game, and I think it's worth playing for the narrative. So anyway, thanks for watching.